Chris, tell me about some recent trends in your valuation calls. Like it's early into 2025, but like, are there things that are popping up for everyone? It could be financials or concerns, stuff like that.
It is for sure kind of an interesting time. Like I would say in the past, I don't know exactly why. Maybe it's from some of the aggregator fallout that sort of, happened, particularly with Amazon FBA businesses within the last 2 years, and it's still happening. I'm seeing a lot of focus on trends, whether it be positive or negative, and whether it be, top line revenue or margin trends, but really specifically sort of the trends of the business from a top line perspective. Sellers kind of bringing that up on calls. What that's kind of led to, as far as like my conversations go with sellers, is sort of talking about the importance of trends. I would really say, like in the last couple of years, I've really started personally to focus on trends. Not only important they are, just, as far as the valuation goes and how, a positive trend affects a multiple or a negative trend, affects it in a different way, but also, how important trends are beyond just the valuation. Like trends are so important. Like I think they're almost maybe the most important thing when it comes to like how realistic is it that we're going to get this deal closed? And I think trends have the biggest effect one way or the other on that happening. It's a question of, should I sell now? Should I sell later? So there's a lot of crystal ball kind of going on both sides of that. So I think the only thing you can really do is like talk through it. If I'm talking to a seller, I'll ask them like, do you see any reason why the trends wouldn't continue? And then kind of start that conversation because, sometimes they'll say, I really don't. Like, I think the trends will continue and this is why. So then, that kind of shifts the conversation toward maybe waiting before you go out to market, and then what that might look like valuation wise for them, whether it's,
Yeah.
6 months down the road or 2 years down the road or whatever. And I've done that, many times. Kind of flip side of that is, well, if trends are positive and you can tell that the seller's really not sure if they can sustain it, then the conversation sort of like, in my opinion, sort of changes to a little bit more of trying to time the sale, which matters to valuation. Obviously, we can't predict that this growth is going to last 5 more months or something. So it's kind of like, if you have any indication, or even even if you don't have an indication, but like the seller just feels the burden of the risk. Maybe they're on the Amazon platform and they just, they've gotten hit so many times by all the different things, or maybe they have a content site. And if that's the case, then the conversation really is more what it's valued at today, and trying to go out to market with a positive trajectory, maybe without knowing what the future holds necessarily.
It sounds like you're saying like because a lot of people like try to time the market, but it's less about timing the market and more about like timing your business, and that could happen. I don't want to say no matter what's happening in the market.
No, you actually said it perfectly. I think it's not about timing the market. It's timing your business. That's a really good way to put it. I've seen a lot of businesses and done a lot of valuations for companies that have negative trends, and it's been fairly common. And I don't pretend to know why that is and why it seems to be across the board. So that's also interesting because I've had plenty though of businesses with really, really positive trends throughout this time. So that's changed. That has affected how I value a business today, where it might have been a little different a few years ago, because part of what we do as advisors is we're trying to determine a valuation that we feel like the market will bear, so that our buyer database, I try to look at it from their perspective as well, like from the buyer's perspective. And so if I'm a buyer and I'm constantly looking at negative trend businesses, and then I see this one that has positive trends, to me, that's different than being in a market where everything's positive trends. And so it's almost like there might be a little more value to that business today that has positive trends, being surrounded by negative trend businesses versus everybody's positive trends and everything's great. So that's one thing I've tried to keep in mind. And then also on the, conversely, it's like a lot of stuff is negative trends, and that's what buyers have to choose from. I think that also maybe has a little bit of impact on, what we're telling sellers when they're looking for valuation. I think it seems like sellers are very open to hearing, valuation numbers. They're not necessarily, they don't, at least recently, they don't seem as concerned about like trying to like max out the valuation and the multiple and all that. I think they just want like an honest assessment. I think from an advisor's perspective, that's so important to just be honest, because at the end of the day, all we have is our time. And I always tell sellers, like, I am not going to tell you about, I promise you, I won't tell you a valuation that I think you want to hear. I think when you tell them that and are honest about that, it sinks in that, whatever valuation I give them is something that I think I can achieve, that I think is realistic, and that I think our buyer pool, which is a very educated pool of buyers that we have, that I think they'll respond to it. So, and so I don't know, I don't know why that is. I don't know if buyers are just continuing, or sellers are, well, both buyers and sellers, but they're just continuing to get more educated, reading more. I know we put out a lot of really awesome, really helpful content. If people want to listen to it, they should. Having educated sellers and having educated buyers is not a bad thing. That is absolutely what you want. But I think just in general, like, sellers seem pretty well educated. I think it just lends itself to conversations that are not so much numbers focused, getting down to the bottom of things and figuring out what's their motivation for wanting to have that call in the first place. And, just it's just conversational.